Jamie has asked me to speak on the topic of spirituality in the context of training. He gave me less than 10 minutes to talk on this topic, and I had many options. I could talk about the whole history of Christian spirituality, or I could talk about different types of methodologies in terms of spiritual disciplines, spiritual phenomena, and all that. But I decided, with just the limited time that was given, I just kind of cut to the chase and just give the gist or the essence of what I think is a very much needed topic in the area of spirituality. Of course, I'm going to try to relate this to the training of the missionaries to North Korea. And hopefully, once North Korea opens up and we experience some form of unification, we may have to even think about training the future leaders of North Korean churches. And so I was wondering how I should start off this message. And yesterday, Pastor Chong-Seung Park gave us a very inspirational message. Do you remember yesterday? It was very short, succinct, but right to the point. And he said, try to imagine what would happen if the unification were to happen and North Korea would open up to the gospel. And in one word, I think he said that there's going to be a chaos, because everyone in the South, the denominations, or the major churches, all kinds of Christian organizations are going to rush into North Korea, trying to establish, plant their flags and establish their headquarters and start doing the works of evangelism and church plant and so forth. And we'll take all sorts of, programs and methodologies with us, the things that we think are going to help to build up the churches and expand the kingdom of God. Along with that, he mentioned the fact that the heresies, heretical groups, cults, and all kinds of sectarian groups are going to make headways into North Korea as well. In the midst of this chaos, what are we going to do? Those of us who really want the biblical, essential type of Christianity are going to be outnumbered for sure, because not everyone has that as their top agenda. They may have as their top agenda to do something in the name of their denominations, or in the name of their home church, or in the name of their Christian organization. But how many churches really ask that question? What is biblical? What is essential? What is truly Christ-centered? And I think that's where we find so many problems in the Korean church. Korean church in general, as all of us can admit, we have so many issues and baggages. And basically, if we were to go into North Korea as the Korean church, we're going to carry all these issues and baggages along with us, and we're going to be downloading them into their region. We have issues with money, fame, power. We've never been able to deal with those issues. We have jealousy, envy, faction, competition. And the whole Korean mentality. More is better. Sooner the better. 빨리, 많이. That kind of mentality. I mean, we have that as a sort of a cultural presupposed way of operation. And that's where even the whole issue of spirituality is plagued by this kind of mentality. Just think about it. How do we measure, how do we evaluate someone's spirituality, or some church's spirituality, or some church leader's spirituality? Based upon how much they pray. As important as prayer is, how many hours they spend in prayer, how many chapters of Bible do they read a day, how much they tithe, how much they participate in certain types of meetings, what kind of services that they do. All of these are calculated based upon numbers. you might have noticed, or intensity. For us Koreans, you have to possess and fervor and energy into that. And more as we observe individuals like that, we say, wow, they're really spiritual. And spirituality has somehow become a competitive thing here in Korea. I remember when I was out here in Korea to just simply learn how to pray and learn some Korean spirituality a long time ago. I visited a prayer mountain and they insisted that I engage in like 40 days fast. Because if you're going to be spiritual, you must do 40 days fast. And in those days, so many Christians, common lay persons were doing 40 days fast. So I was kind of forced into that. I almost died in the process, but I was forced into that. And they would say, well, there are people who are doing 40 days fast every year. And I was tempted to go that route, but I decided to forfeit that in the process. But what I have experienced in Korea, by the way, I grew up most of my life in the States, and I came to Korea, and I'm now residing in Korea. But what I've observed about Korean spirituality is that we have imposed a legalism. We have imposed certain type of our cultural biases upon even spirituality. And we don't ask the most essential question. That is, how did Christ do it? For example, we say, well, Christ, he had morning prayer. I am totally for morning prayer, by the way. I am not against any of this. I teach spiritual disciplines at my school. Well, but we make it into like Christ went to the desolate places early in the morning. He wanted to spend time with the Father. So we make that into early prayer meeting with Juya and all of this intensity. I just don't see that. I don't think Jesus had to cry out, Juyo, that's himself, so cry out, Father, Father. But we have those prayer meetings after about 30 minutes of this. Wow, we've imitated Jesus Christ. But we do a lot of things like that, and we superficially take Jesus' case and impose our own presupposed way of operation and say that's spirituality. And how do we give credits to ourselves? Check. I've done all of these things: church life, fellowship life, evangelism, tithing, once a year short-term mission trip. I must be a great Christian. I must be a really spiritual person. Oftentimes, discipleship is like that. The navigators, the circle, worshiping God, prayer, Bible study, fellowship, evangelism. And I say, I'm a good Christian. And I've operated like that for many, many years as well. But what I'm realizing more and more as I teach and research in the area of spirituality is that it's not so much a putting on, like putting on more clothes, more titles. I mean, I have a title as a professor directing spiritual theology program. And then, an expertise in the area of historical spirituality and so forth. It's all this putting on. But more and more I experience spirituality, I realize it's more of stripping off. And you can't get to the essence, very essential, unless you strip off of all that is gaudy and all that is of extra. And so I'm wondering, based upon what Pastor Chung-Soo Park said yesterday, he came to a conclusion that it's just Jesus. Jesus Christ is the answer to everything. I don't know how that plays out, but I am utterly convicted that Jesus Christ is the answer to everything. And so I was asking this question. What does the picture look like? We have all these visions and plans and strategies for North Korea. We have all these programs. NGOs are like targeting North Korea. The businesses are targeting North Korea. Churches and denominations are targeting North Korea. The whole world is targeting North Korea. And China and the United States, they are targeting North Korea. In the midst of that, I ask a simple question. How would Jesus himself walk into North Korea? And the picture is not as complex as we think it is. If we can be like Jesus, just walking into North Korea, In that sense, I think what the North Korean missionaries are forced to do right now, they could only walk in and be unpresuming, unpretentious, just in the most natural, common to earth way, and through especially presence evangelism, friendship evangelism, relational evangelism, they're making impacts and slowly making inroads. How is that going to change? Suddenly they open up, we're going to rush in and we're going to do it the business style, we're going to do some kind of program style, or we're going to do upgraded high-tech media style. I don't think so. I'd like to propose that we stay with the most common, most down-to-earth, everyday type of spirituality I think the missionaries to North Korea are forced to do. And that's not because their hands are bound, but I believe they are learning how to do the true incarnational way of spirituality in the process. And so my thesis would be learning how to do the way Jesus did it. Don't make it too complicated, but simply walk as though Jesus would walk and talk as though Jesus would talk. Try to simulate Christ-likeness. And now I do have to say that when we talk about imitating Christ, sometimes we make that into legalism as well. Imitation of Christ is like legalistic ways that we presume to be Christ-likeness. But suppose we think of Christ-likeness as in a truly incarnated way, and that is, this is another area that so many times the missionaries think that we know, and mission theologians think that we know what it means to be incarnational. I, working in the area of missiology, oftentimes come across this whole theme of incarnational missions. And what we mean by incarnation missions in general, for those of you who are experts in this area, we mean inculturation. We're talking about culture. We're talking about quickly putting on the cloak. But for me, culture is simply putting on the cloak. You take off the cloak, and what do we have? We have the physical body. That's what incarnation is primarily. It means Jesus Christ, the Son of God, became a human being in body, soma. And so what we need to learn is the basic language of soma, learning how to operate with our body, which is in soul body, of course, or embodied state that includes the soul, of course. But we need to learn how to operate as physical human beings who know how to move. That's the kinetic side of it, move and operate as agents of Christ. It's as simple as that. We need to go back to those basics and begin to experiment with that. And before we talk about North Korea, we just need to talk about how we're going to operate like this in our everyday situation, everyday church situation, everyday open mission situation before North Korea opens up. That's going to be the practicum arena for us, to learn how to operate with our body as a whole being, not some dichotomized self. Because another issue in Korean spirituality, we tend to focus on the spiritual, the mystical, and that's what spiritual theology makes. No, spiritual theology is the embodied spirituality theology. It has to be the whole being, and we have to learn how to feel comfortable with our being in the body, learn how to move as the body, learn how to be agents of Christ in the body, and do the works in Abraham Maslow's the survival level so that we can survive and produce. But once we develop that, we go into the realms of art, more idealized and more beautified ways of expressions. And I believe that North Koreans understand this language. They understand language of the body. They understand language of the material. They understand language of work. They also understand the language of art in their sort of, personally, that's not my style, right? But I do appreciate the fact that they do have that appreciation for arts. And so we take from ground zero and slowly reconstitute the incarnational model. I think that's the only way for North Korea mission. And if I were to give North Korea the best gift ever in terms of Christianity, I'd like to give the gift of Christ and Christ's way. That is the incarnated way. Amen.